Thanks to Equip Foods for sponsoring today's video. If you're overwhelmed when it comes to healthy eating, especially when it comes to making those foods in the kitchen, you're definitely in good company. A lot of us will feel motivated and inspired to do it, especially this time of year when we're wrapping up the holiday season and going into the new year and all of those kind of resets we like to do. A lot of the time we'll have the motivation to do it. We may even have the groceries, but when it comes to actually putting those meals together, sometimes it can just feel so overwhelming. So today I want to share some of my ideas for healthy meals that just practically make themselves. That way you have a few ingredients on hand and you can easily put together really nutrient dense and nourishing meals for you or you and your spouse, or if you have kids, because I know the more people you're cooking for, the more tricky it becomes when you're trying to eat healthy. So the key to that is really just always having recipes that you know how to make that are really delicious but are simple. And that's what I'm going to show you today. And I'll make sure to link the recipes here in the description box, so those will be down below. This meal that I'm making here is one of our favorites. I have a family of 6, so I always need to make sure that I have meals that everyone can eat, which can be a little tricky, but this is one of them. And it's Hawaiian meatballs with peppers and broccoli. So it's really healthy, just meat and vegetables, but you can serve it over, like I like to serve it over brown rice, and that makes it all gluten-free. So it's just lighter, but still really filling. I like to use grass-fed beef with this, but you could use ground chicken or ground turkey, so whichever your family prefers. So all I'm doing is taking a pound. You can double this, but it does stretch pretty far, especially if you're putting it over rice or rice noodles or something like that. So what I'm doing is taking a pound of my grass-fed ground beef. I'm just adding in 1 egg, and then to help bind it, instead of using something like breadcrumbs or even sourdough breadcrumbs, I'm using almond flour, and you'll never know that it's in there. It's like miraculous, but that even adds more protein and fat, so I think it's a great little hack. And then I like to add in a little splash of either chicken broth or bone broth, and a little bit of garlic powder and onion powder, and salt and pepper to taste. We're going to be drizzling a delicious kind of homemade Hawaiian sauce over it. And so for that, I'm using half a cup of coconut sugar, which I love. It's just a lower glycemic sugar. It's unrefined, so it's great for sweetening things. I'm using a 1/4 cup of organic ketchup, and then I like to do about 3 tablespoons of raw apple cider vinegar, and then 2 tablespoons of coconut aminos, and a 1/4 cup of really nice and fresh pineapple juice. I like to buy the kind that's in the jar or the glass jar, and I mix that all up, and it makes the most delicious and really natural Hawaiian sauce. So anything that's kind of sweet, especially when it comes to vegetables, kids are gonna like. So if you're a mom, that is key. You want to make sure that you can find ways to cook vegetables that your kids will actually eat. So this is one of them. And I love just piling it all in one dish. It's kind of like a sheet pan recipe, but I like to do it in a 9x13. So all I'm doing is I use a little medium-sized ice cream scoop, and I scoop all those meatballs out. I don't even roll them by hand. They work perfectly with just a scoop. And then I top it with the bell pepper that I chopped really coarsely, so it's nice and big and can kind of roast down. And then I'll put that in the oven at about 425, and I'll let that cook part of the way, but then I'll take it out and I'll add in fresh broccoli florets and stir that all together and put it back into the oven, and everything is just saucy and delicious and cooked down so it's nice and tender, and you have the kind of browned meatballs in there, and it's so easy to make. You can make this in like 10 minutes and just get it into the oven. I always have things like brown rice already prepped in my fridge, so I'll just pull out my brown rice, heat that up a little bit. You can put it on the stove with a splash of chicken broth and reheat it that way, and then serve this right over the top of it. Drizzle that delicious, really natural Hawaiian sauce. So much more low glycemic. It doesn't have things like caramel color and dextrose and all those weird ingredients that you'll find in store-bought sauces. So this is a really easy way to eat super clean. You could even just skip the brown rice and do extra veggies, and this is going to be an amazing quick meal that you can throw together without having to think about it too much. Next, I want to share with you another meal that literally takes no prep time because it's my morning smoothie. And I love these because you can sneak in so many beneficial things right in the morning on an empty stomach and get all those benefits. All you have to do is blend it. That's why I wanted to partner with Equip Foods on today's video, because I use their prime protein in all of my smoothies and shakes. And why I love them is because it's grass-fed protein. So each serving has 4 ounces of grass-fed beef protein. I always love finding really clean products, and that's why I love Equip, because you're gonna get exactly what they say you're getting. Their products don't have a bunch of fillers and chemicals, so it's a beef isolate that's grass-fed, and I prefer that to things like whey and casein-based proteins because those are a little bit harder to digest. This is my favorite. I love the chocolate, but they also have other flavors like vanilla, iced coffee. There's so many different flavors that taste really good, and then they even have one that is completely unflavored. So the only ingredient in that one is literally just grass-fed beef. You can use them in a million different ways. You can put them in your shakes or your smoothies, or you can put them in things like baked oats. You can just add a scoop of that and get 20 grams of protein anytime you need it, and it's the cleanest and best quality around. So if you guys want to check out Equip too, they're offering my viewers here an incredible offer. You can go to my link, which is equipfoods.com/healthyelizabeth, and use my code healthyelizabeth, and it's going to give you 25% off your first order, or even better, you can add it to a subscription and get 35% off your first subscription. And I hope you guys try it out. It'll all be linked down in the description. And thanks so much again to Equip for sponsoring today's video. So for this morning smoothie recipe, there really are no measurements because you can't go wrong. If you pour a bunch of stuff in, you can just blend it to your consistency that you like. So I start with a really good kefir. You can make it yourself or buy it store-bought. And then I'll add in a big scoop of this chocolate grass-fed protein. I like how this is minimal ingredients because then I can add in all of my good stuff and exactly what I want to my taste. So I'm gonna add in frozen organic strawberries. I love to buy these in bulk. They're super economical to do it that way. So I'll put in a few of those. I like to do bee pollen, which is great for allergies and a bunch of other things. There's a lot of uses for it. And then I'll do my kefir, and then I also like canned coconut milk. So I'll take a can of coconut milk that's organic with no guar gum, and I'll shake it up in a jar and put that in my fridge for smoothies. And between that and the protein and the kefir, it makes the most delicious and creamy smoothie. I just top it off with a little bit of bee pollen because I like the crunch, and this is just an amazing morning smoothie. So full of all the good stuff. I'm a huge fan of meat protein and all of the amino acids that come in that, but I'm also a fan of natural sources of plant protein like chickpeas and lentils. And so today I'm kind of branching out, but I'm making kind of like a homemade chickpea burger, but they're like little patties that you can fry up in a cast iron skillet. I'm using 2 of the jars of the jovial chickpeas, and the only reason I'm doing these is because I like that they soak them overnight and then pressure cook them, because that's exactly what I would do at home. But if I didn't have time, then I love having these jars in my pantry. They're one of the best brands for jarred beans and stuff like that. So I'm taking those and I'm just draining those off and rinsing them and then drying them on a tea towel. And then this is going to come together so quickly because all we're going to do for the most part is put everything in a food processor, pulse it up, and then fry these up in a cast iron skillet. So I have about half of a medium sweet onion that I popped into the food processor. And then I'm adding in all of those rinsed and dried beans and a whole bunch of parsley. You could do flat leaf parsley or you could do cilantro, so whatever you're in the mood for. And then I season it with about a tablespoon of cumin to give it kind of like a smokier flavor and just really good like zingy flavor. You could squeeze a little bit of lime or lemon juice over these at the end too. But I love just adding in all of those fresh herbs, and then we've got the fresh onion in there, and all you have to do is pulse it up several times. We're not really trying to make a paste, we're just trying to break it down and make sure that we can form little patties out of it. And then I like to make it gluten-free just because I think it's really easy to digest. And so I'm using just a couple of tablespoons of chickpea flour or garbanzo bean flour. I love using different kinds of flours like almond flour or cassava flour. They're interesting and give your body different nutrients, and I don't do well with too much gluten, so sometimes it's nice to switch it up. So I'm just going to pulse that together until it forms a nice ball. You could even taste it at this point and check it for salt and pepper because there's no egg or anything. It's just completely plant forward. And it's really economical to eat things like beans and whole grains and lots of fresh vegetables or frozen vegetables. So this is just a fun way to try something new and branch out. And it's really, really delicious. They're great to keep on hand for things like quick lunches because you can just pull one out and have it with a little bit of hummus and cucumbers and carrots. And it's just an amazing little snack or side. So all I do now is dump it out onto my cutting board, and I'm going to press those into a log first, and I roll it out to where it's about a foot long or so. You can do a little bit longer, and then I'm going to put this in the fridge because you want to let it set up and get nice and firm before you roll it, because there's not a bunch of binder, there's not like an egg in there to keep it together. So if you just press it together into a log and refrigerate it for a few minutes, you can come back later. You could even come back the next day and then just pop these in a skillet with a little bit of avocado oil, and you have a delicious little lunch chickpea patty or chickpea burger. After you let the dough chill and it's nice and firm, then I like to make about 1-inch slices, and I put a whole bunch of avocado oil in the bottom of my cast iron skillet. I made sure to preheat it first, that way it was nice and hot, and then I add in the oil, and then let that oil heat up for a few minutes, and then add in the cold fritter. That way it doesn't just absorb all the oil, but it gets a nice crispy skin. And you can even put a little bit of a lid over it to help them cook through, but what I like to do is just press them down after I flip them. That way they are a little bit thinner and they cook through better, but popping a lid on it too helps it cook through. And these are so good. They have the best exterior texture and they cook up in no time at all. So you could actually make this dough on like a Sunday and keep it in your fridge, and then whenever you're ready for lunch during the week, you could just fry a couple of them up, and they're really quick to make. Whenever I'm trying to eat healthier or just make sure that I'm eating plenty of whole foods, there's nothing I love better than a roasted chicken, but that does take time to make in the oven. So when I want to just be hands off, what I've been loving doing is putting it in my slow cooker and just letting it cook low and slow all day long. And the meat is just fall apart tender and so juicy. So this is now one of my favorite ways to make it. And all I like to do is take my chicken and I make this little herby butter to go on it. So I take about 6 tablespoons, maybe 5 tablespoons of salted butter, and then I'll mix up whatever herbs I have in the fridge. So this week I had some sage and some flat leaf parsley. So I just did that with some salt and pepper, and I mix it into this softened butter. And then I'm gonna coat a whole chicken with all of this delicious herb butter, and it's gonna cook down that slow cooker, and you're gonna have the rendered juice from the meat and the butter. So I'm using a whole chicken from Pasture Bird. This is regeneratively grown, and they are one of my favorite chicken brands. So if you're looking for a good chicken, you can actually get this on pasturebird.com, and they have a subscription box. So that's what I'm doing here. I actually have several chickens coming a month now on my box. So I'll leave my link down below, and you can sign up for one of their subscriptions or just order some of their meat. It's amazing quality, and they're super transparent, which is so important to me. So I've been ordering my chicken from there, and then I'm just adding in some garlic too. I forgot to do this earlier, so I'm just gonna mince up several cloves of garlic. But what you could do is even just cut the top off a whole bulb of garlic and put it in the slow cooker, because as those drippings kind of get into the garlic, it's gonna slowly kind of roast it and soften it, and then you can squeeze it out. That's actually one of my favorite, almost like a side dish to have. It's just a whole bulb of roasted garlic. It is so powerful and anti-inflammatory, so it's a great thing to have, and the flavor when it roasts down is just mild and incredible. So now I'm taking my chicken and I quartered an onion and put it under the chicken to kind of hold the chicken up and to keep it from sitting in all those juices the whole time. And then I just take a little bit of a butter knife and I'll rub all that butter all over the chicken. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to melt anyway. You just want to make sure that it's going to melt into all the different areas of the chicken. Then the lid on and forget it. So I like to let that cook low and slow for about 6 hours, depending on the size of my chicken. But these are pretty small, young chickens, so they're nice and tender and they cook up really easily. We all know that we should probably be sneaking in more greens into our diet. They're loaded with vitamins and minerals. All the fiber is great for your gut health and your skin too. All the vitamin C that's in leafy greens is incredible for skin health. So I'm going to show you just a really easy and quick way that's delicious to add greens on the side of your dinners all the time. So what I like to do is take a mixture of a couple different greens. So sometimes I'll do dinosaur kale, or today I'm doing red Russian kale, and then I'll pair that with spinach or green beans, and all I do is heat up my cast iron, get it nice and warm, and then I'll add in either a couple tablespoons of avocado oil or butter. Butter is so good with leafy greens. And I'll take a bunch of just smashed garlic cloves and put them in there and kind of let them infuse the butter or the oil, whichever I'm using. And then once that garlic gets just kind of golden brown and it's really kind of roasted and has that more mild flavor, then I'll add in a little bit of butter. That way I haven't burnt the butter. I've toasted that garlic in the oil and kind of made a garlic oil, and then I add in the butter too because I love the combination and I find it doesn't burn if you do it this way. So I like doing oil and butter later. So then I'll add in that kale first because it takes a little bit longer to cook. And the key here is to just let that kale kind of wilt down first, then add in the spinach later because spinach cooks up so quickly. So I add that in and stir it all together, and then I'll season it with salt, and then it's going to release all of its water content, and you just want to let that cook out until there's not a bunch of water in the pan anymore and it's nice and just tender. So don't be afraid to let your greens cook down. In fact, some people say that your body can even absorb nutrients more from cooked greens. And I find this especially helpful in the winter time and in the cold months because we're not craving those salads. Our bodies are kind of adapting to the colder weather, and they're craving more things like soups and warm salads and warm greens. So I love having just a big cast iron skillet. This is really big. This is a 12-inch cast iron skillet full of just pounds of greens, and it cooks down to nothing, and you can easily eat just a huge scoop of this along with that delicious roasted chicken, and you have an amazing dinner. And to make this family friendly, you can throw a little bit of pasta on the side. Just some butter noodles are what my kids like sometimes, but I happen to have a little bit of garlic mashed potatoes left in my fridge for leftovers, so I paired those leftovers with this new meal, and it was absolutely fantastic and really easy to make. So I hope this video was super helpful for you. I truly want you to just love healthy eating and cooking and feel like you know what you're doing. Don't forget you can check out my link for Equip so you have grass-fed protein anytime you need it. And thanks so much for joining me in the kitchen.